You're tuned in to Around the Lens, the internet's only live streaming roundtable discussion podcast, featuring Zach Roberts, Ron Hamilton, Travis Keys, and your host, David J. Murphy. All right, hello and welcome to Around the Lens episode 156. I'm your host. Episode 165. Transposed my numbers there. I'm your host, David J. Murphy. Joining me as always are my co-host, Zach Roberts. Hello, Zach.
Hello. How goes it?
It goes very well. And Travis Keys. Hello, Travis.
What's going on, guys?
Not much. You all doing all right? Having fun? How was Northern Shore Course, Zach?
Yes.
It was, I'm very happy I went. Sad that I waited this long to go. It's great actually meeting some of the people that we have on the show in person. There was a whole Around the Lens cast and crew basically there. I think we had 7 people total, wow. Which was pretty cool. Actually meeting these people in person as opposed to through video Skype or whatever else.
Yeah.
But also just incredibly informative and one of the best put together conferences I've ever gone to. Just when it comes to not actually putting panels at the same time that you might want to go to at this like just organizationally and learning wise, incredibly useful, especially since everybody that was putting on panels actually knew what they were talking about. Which, as a person who goes to a lot of political conferences, it's amazing to see the number of people that get speaking gigs that actually have never experienced what they're talking about. So like Northern Shore Course, you have people like Todd Bigelow, who is basically the guy you want to talk to, or whose workshop you want to go to if you want to actually learn how to not just make money in this business but not lose money because contracts and copyright and things like that. But yeah, it was a super fun time, and if you're a photojournalist, especially if you're a photojournalist earlier in your career, I can't recommend it enough.
Nice, awesome, man. How was that Around the Lens panel discussion that you had there, right? With all the panelists, right? You guys did that panel discussion, right?
I had basically a really bad cold the entire time, so. I was coughing a lot and kind of like in the back of the room trying to stay away from everyone not have them, get anything. But we did do a big group photo, which I'll be posting on Around the Lens Facebook page pretty soon.
Sweet. All right. Well, that's good. And then, Travis, you did some cool stuff, right? You did a little bit of Alice in Wonderland.
I wanted to meet Zach. Yeah, I wanted to meet Zach there, but I was in the studio all day and then couldn't get out of it. But we did this kind of conceptual shoot with this great social media person that has can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. I see a shake in your head. It's like, oh, we lost Travis.
I heard myself somewhere else. I thought it was Ron's computer.
So we did this huge conceptual shoot with this wonderful influencer that Cheat Day Eats. That's just got only 500,000 followers or something like that. But we did a whole kind of Alice in Wonderland shoot in a great studio, and it was a load of fun. 4-foot flamingos and cakes and all kind of table stuff. It was it's insane.
Wow, awesome, man.
Yeah, fun times.
I'm sure we'll see some of those imagery up soon,
absolutely,
or it's already
maybe
up
on
now?
my Instagram. No, there's some teasers up and some videos on Instagram, but I'm editing away.
Awesome. And I can't forget our man in Hawaii, Ron Hamilton. Hello, Ron. How you doing, buddy?
Aloha to everybody in the mainland.
What's new in your
world? We didn't have a short course here. We had the long course.
Ooh,
it's still going on. So
yeah. Hawaiian long course.
I think it's been a while since we've all been on at the same time.
Yeah, I know, right?
One of us all often on assignment or something like that.
The Four Amigos. All right, Ron. We're glad to have you on.
As the joke I told at the Northern Shore Course, what's a group of two or more white men in the same room at the same time? It's called a podcast.
I was gonna say it's called an Around the Lens.
I thought it was funny.
Well, I wasn't going to make today either, but Melina was coming on, and I couldn't pass that up.
There you go.
That's sweet.
Good intro into our first guest. We have 2 guests this evening. I'll introduce the first one. Melina Mara. Melina, please tell us about yourself.
Hello, gentlemen.
Hello.
Thanks for having me on. This is a great podcast.
Thank you.
I'm honored to be with you guys.
Well, we're honored to have you.
I am national political photographer at the Washington Post. Thanks. I've been at the Post for about 15 years now, and before that, I've pretty much always been a newspaper photographer. I worked in the Pacific Northwest at newspapers there, and in the Midwest and in the Southwest. I went to University of Missouri School of Journalism for graduate school, and had lots of internships, which then led to jobs, which is this wonderful way that's kind of going away a little bit. At least the paid internships anyway. They paid enough then that I was able to live and go from internship to internship. And now that's a little bit less common that there are that many. The Washington Post has an internship that pays well, and you can do it, but pretty much only the medium-sized to bigger papers have that. So I cover politics for the Washington Post, national political issues, the campaign trail, Capitol Hill, the White House, and then I go off and I do projects and stories, and I've been doing this for a long time. The Washington Post has gone through lots and lots of changes since we have Bezos as our owner for the last 3 to 4 years now, and we got very small. And kind of a small but mighty band. And then the Grahams found Bezos, and now we've just been growing. And it definitely is a different experience to be at the Post now. Similarly to more of its heyday.
Yeah.
And now this is another kind of growth spurt of doing the journalism. So yeah,
awesome.
Interesting to be there. But still, photojournalism, Washington Post is still a word paper, kind of like how the New York Times is a word paper. So still, but definitely visuals are more equal at the Washington Post than in the past. It's definitely getting there. But, yeah, it's a little slow.
You said it was different after Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post. Does that mean like you have more creative freedom or more ability to perhaps focus on subjects for longer, or how has that affected photojournalism specifically?
Well, we definitely have more resources. So we have more financial resources to go off and work on stories.
Okay.
So many of us, almost all of us, of the staff of 18, we will go off and we will tell stories in the country, around the world. We are an international newspaper, a national international newspaper. Definitely when we were smaller, when the Grahams still owned us, we didn't have those kind of resources. And now we also have just larger staffs in general. We have, investigative has been beefed up, national has been beefed up, foreign has been beefed up. So the things that we did well, Bezos definitely put money towards that to kind of enhance.
Yeah.
And our social media is fantastic. I mean, we've definitely, the news gathering kind of machine has definitely improved, which helps a photojournalist do their job better. Absolutely. At the Washington Post. Yeah, definitely. It's a good place to work these days.
Love to hear that.
Well, we'll be talking about some of the work.
It's really good to hear.
Yeah, inspiring.
We're not used to good news. Yeah. That's good. Yeah, we're not used to good news in the field.
No, this is very, very rare. This is actually really rare. That it's a good place to work. We're not. We don't have layoffs. We don't have furloughs. I mean, right now. But of course, the business is, peaks and valleys.
Yeah.
So yeah. So you just do the best storytelling you can, because who knows how long it's going to last.
How's it going over at the Washington Times? Any news from your competitors?
Well, yeah. Well, the Washington Times is definitely a small place. It's printed limitedly and only in town. Otherwise you have to go online. And they have I know they have reporters, they have a couple of photographers, and they do it the best job they can with a small staff. Yep. But they have shrunk because once upon a time, we know that it was a really great photojournalism paper.
Absolutely. All right, great. Well, glad to have you on. We'll be talking a little bit more about your work that was featured in the Washington Post Top 100 list. But let's go to our other guest, this week. That persistent background noise you might be hearing is from Elijah Nouvelage's car as he's driving and talking to us. How you doing, Elijah?
I'm hanging in there. It's been a weird, frustrating day, but I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Tell the audience a little bit about your experience.
I kind of came to photojournalism, fairly late in life, I guess, for my life anyway. I was bumming around the world for a couple of years, went back to school, dropped out of school, lived in Thailand and Ibiza and India for a while, and kind of just decided I love photography. Went back to school at San Francisco State and did a couple internships and kind of been freelancing ever since for the last 4 or 5 years.
Nice. Well, let's start with you then. You were featured in Washington Post's Top 100 Photos of 2018, and I want to talk about the image that was featured in the list that was featured by Washington Post. Let me just pull it up here for our viewing audience. Getting to it in just a second here. Almost there. Oh, there we go. Okay. Cheers for Governor Doug Ducey from Scottsdale, Arizona. I'll just bring it up here for our viewing audience. It's a photograph. Looks like from a Trump rally, not a Trump rally, but maybe you can describe this photo.
It was an election night rally for Martha McSally. In the Senate race was the big one in Arizona. I kind of shot some pictures of Doug Ducey when he came on stage because I was there and I figured they might kind of be good down the line. But really, I was there for Martha McSally. It was a really, really tight race. I think people knew going into the election night events that it may not be decided that night. But at the same time, we all kind of anticipated that she would make an appearance, win or lose, she would say something. And Kristen Sinema, her Democratic competitor, was also expected to at some point show up. And it was this weird night. It was my very first assignment for the Post ever. And I flew in from California for it. And I get there and I'm just kind of, I don't want to leave and do feature-y shots, which is kind of what I prefer to shoot, because at any point in time she can come on stage. No one knows what her schedule looks like. So I'm kind of stuck near the front of this room taking pictures of people on stage or looking at the stage, afraid to go anywhere. Can't miss the one person I'm there to photograph. And neither of them came out the whole night. It was kind of frustrating. I was in touch with a friend of mine, Lindsay Wasson, who was freelancing for Reuters over at Kristen Sinema's camp, and we're both just texting going, do you have any word? Is she going to come out? Is McSally going to come out? And neither of them did. So I kind of missed out on making really cool feature-y pictures because I was just kind of in this limbo the whole night.
But you did make a really neat picture here. Talk to us about, again, like the inspiration for this photo specifically. Were you just kind of looking for a crowd shot?
I was just looking for anything that had color, emotion. The crowd didn't really have any. There wasn't a lot of signs. There wasn't a lot of buttons. I mean, I know those are cheats anyway, and I hate to fall on those as a crutch, but if no one's cheering and no one's really showing emotion, you've got to find something. And I had a limited range of where I could be because of when she might come out. So I was just trying to find anything that I could shoot that would please the editors on, again, my first assignment for them. So I like that guy. He has, all the flag colors on and has the hat. He seems excited. So I kind of waited for him to do something, anything. I think you all know the feeling when you kind of find someone, you're like, there's potential here. Now someone just has to do something, and you just kind of wait the scene out.
Wait for it. There it is.
Yeah. Waiting for the moment. Exactly. That's right.
Exactly. And being a political photographer, it's like that. It's that patient persistence thing. It's just like you just wait for the moment. You're waiting for the mood. You're waiting for the American voter to say, "This is why I voted this way. This is why I support." And I mean, you did a great job of just being in the moment and making the picture. That was good. Yeah.
I was at a rally for Elizabeth Warren the other day here in Georgia, and I wasn't on assignment for anyone, so it was super fun. I get to just find the scene that I want to make a picture, and then just sit there and plant myself and go, I don't need to get all the other shots for the wires. I don't need to get the medium, the wide, the crowd. I'm just going to wait for this one shot because I know this will work. And I think I got it. I loved it. It's on my Instagram. But so I love that feeling of being able to find something and then just say, that's it. This is my money shot, and just wait for it. But, you know, a lot of times, I'm sure Melina knows this working for the Post, sometimes you have to get all the shots you need because you know that's what they're going to use the next day, and then you kind of stalk around for the photos you want to make.
Right.
But it's really nice to cover stuff and not be on assignment because you can make only the pictures you want.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting.
I mean, when you shoot for the beast, when you shoot for the beast, you got to shoot for the beast, and then you can, kind of free yourself. But I don't know. But the Washington Post, I'm so glad that you work for the Washington Post now because we have editors that really they're looking for the unexpected. They're looking for the more storytelling. They're not looking for what the wires are going to be giving in more of a standard way. They're looking for more storytelling and different. It's like the Washington Post and the New York Times are like boutique newspapers. It's like they're news magazines. So really, if you shoot like a magazine photographer, and you just kind of forget the wire concept.
Oh, I totally agree. But in a story about McSally, they could use some really nice artsy pictures as secondary or tertiary pictures. But if there's no picture of her, it's probably not going to make the paper the next day. So, yeah.
There you go. There you go.
I'm down with shooting all the other stuff in the hopes that an editor is going to go, you know what? We like this picture. We're going to use it. There's got to be a main picture of the main subject. Yeah. But
and, it's interesting what you said about color, right? Looking for a pop of color, and obviously he's wearing the "Make America Great Again" and red hat, and of course that definitely stands out amongst the sea of people wearing normal clothing. And it made me think. I can't think of any other presidency or candidate who has had such a iconic piece of clothing associated with their campaign. I remember back in the day, they used to have buttons for candidates. But never I can't think of any sort of clothing item that has ever represented a candidate as much as, or a president as much as, again, the "Make America Great Again" hat. Anybody think of anything, or is that pretty much in line?
I can't think of a single thing. Yeah, there's the Reagan Bush shirt. I've seen that around a couple times. I mean that seems to have stood the test of time, but I would not call it iconic. It's
Yeah.
Nixon now more than ever.
Oh my God, Ron, you are super duper hot.
Whoa.
A little bit.
Thank you, Dave. So
you're coming in like a CB radio. I can't understand.
Let me pop myself down here.
Anyways, while we get Ron gets himself squared away, let's go over to your imagery, Melina. You've actually got 3 images in the Washington Post Top 100. I'm gonna
light year. Is that a light year for you?
Yeah.
Fabulous. You can't see my face right now, but I'm completely not shocked by that news.
Well,
no, but the interesting thing is that we don't choose the. We're not part of the editing process, and so you're frequently surprised of what they pick,
Absolutely,
and and usually it's more about the news of the day.
Yeah.
Is why they pick it.
Is it like the Oscars? You get a call in the morning, someone's alerted you to it. Like what? How do you usually find out? Is it like someone sends you a note, or do they send you a note, or someone like a friend calling you up, like, "Hey, you made the list."
Yeah, that was basically it. Hey, you made the list. I'm like, oh, okay, good.
Oh,
thank you so much. Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Well, of course, for the first 2 photos in this 3-photo series, you shot the Kavanaugh trials, or not trials, but hearings.
Here.
What was that? Yeah, hearings.
I actually photographed the Kavanaugh hearings, and then when Professor Blasey Ford came to testify, I was there as well. Yeah, and that was a fascinating experience to obviously capture the moment and the emotion and the intensity of what was happening in this hearing room. I've covered a lot of hearings.
Yeah.
Over the years in my position as the political photographer, and it was tense. It was you had the Democrats who were very aggressive. You had Chairman Grassley, who was trying to control it all, and then you also had during the professor's testimony, you had the Republicans who had the lawyer asking her the questions. So you had the silent Republicans. So you had all these faces that you were photographing besides Kavanaugh and besides the professor.
Well, they started out with the lawyer, right? And then they abandoned them.
Yes, they did later, but they stayed pretty long. It was let's see. I think it was Lindsey Graham who actually decided to just can the lawyer, and then he just took it.
Yeah.
What's it like going into?
That was.
I think fascinating is not the word most of America would have used to describe those hearings, although it definitely applies. But that was very diplomatic of you, Melina. I appreciate that.
What's it like going into something like that, where you must have certain expectations of, like, maybe fireworks or something like that, versus the reality of what you got? Did it exceed, or did it? What was the reality for you on it?
I think in such a hearing as that, it was just. The Cohen hearing was just last week. When you go into these more high-profile hearings, you're very prepared. You're very ready for anything. You make sure that you have a backup for your backup, and you make sure. You can't really miss a moment in these kind of hearings. But in the Kavanaugh hearing, we did not expect the amount of fireworks, in the sense of. That there was going to be somebody that comes forward and actually says that, she was attacked by him. No one could have predicted that. The reality was, so much better than any fiction. We just had to be very, very solid documentarians. And the one thing about the Washington, D.C. press corps of photographers is that they're all really solid photographers because you just can't miss it. You can't miss the moment. And they all did, great job. I was one of the rare women in the well while Blasey Ford was actually at the table during the hearing. And there were 2 New York Times freelance photographers that were there as well that were female. And people kept asking us, actually, so how did that feel for you to be there? And, it's so interesting, maybe because they're a little bit younger than me, those 2 photographers, but in my generation, because I've always been around so many men in this more male-dominated industry, I didn't really think about it much. I just knew that this was, that this was very unique, and this was, and this was the news, and it was going to be the news for a long time. But then after a while, you sat there and you're like, oh yeah, this is, this is history, and this is history again, and we've experienced this before. And so, so it actually was an honor to be a woman in that situation, because it was really, it was history.
Yeah.
And so that was really unique. It was very unique.
I wonder if there were any women photojournalists during the the other hearing from the 90s. What was the one?
Clarence Thomas.
Yeah.
Thomas and Hill.
Clarence Thomas, Hill. There were no women that I have a memory of, that were there, at that time. And of course, we also had a situation where, the committee, and this was actually because of the professor's request, that we had a lot less people in the well documenting her, because it's very intimidating to have, photographers photographing, as you're going through a very, very intense questioning.
Sure.
With Brett Kavanaugh, we had the normal number.
Okay.
But with her, we had less of a number.
And what is the normal number?
Well, he wasn't reliving any trauma. It's a little bit different.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
What is the number
definitely different.
What's the normal number?
It's more by organization than number. It's all of the majors. So we have all of the majors. Mm-hmm. So it's like all of the wires, all of the major newspapers, and then you have the newspapers or the publications that are Capitol Hill and White House. So you'll have like Politico and Roll Call, going, and then you'll have more, then you'll have the magazines. And so you can have, you can have, 20 photographers in the well.
Yeah.
But all of us are wearing dark clothing with quiet cameras, and all stay below the dais. And we're very good at crawling and being unobtrusive. So,
yeah.
When you say quiet,
are you guys using blimps or are you guys using mirrorless cameras? What makes them quiet? Is it blimps?
No. It isn't quiet like that. It's people have D5s down there. People have, Mark IIIs down there. I actually use Sony at this point, and also Nikon D5. So I have a combination kind of kit, which, some people do. But no, we are not actually required in hearings to have silent cameras. No.
Do you think that will be something that might come to? Do you think that might be something that might come to fruition, in the era of mirrorless cameras kind of being the norm, in the future here?
Yeah.
Silent shooting?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're already beginning that at the White House when you go into the Oval Office. They're very sensitive to the sound.
Right.
And also television is in there. And so, yeah, they're definitely, there is a reaction to the new technology. And so, yes.
So are they mandating it or just asking or advocating for it?
Asking.
Okay.
Asking.
But they're not going to turn away somebody with a D5 just because they have a D5? Or can D5 shoot mirrorless?
Not yet.
Or it shoots.
Not yet. No. D5 cannot. Nikon's, no.
Yeah.
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet.
However, the 5D is pretty quiet. But
It's a quiet setting, but it's not silent.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a quiet setting, but it's not silent. Where the A9 is
Sony,
silent.
yeah, the A9 is disturbingly silent, like to the point where sometimes you're shooting and you're like, did I actually take a picture?
Yeah.
What would you say was the difference in overall feeling of shooting Brett Kavanaugh versus shooting, Christine Blasey Ford? And also, do you like beer?
Good one.
Thank you.
That was a good one. Oh my God. Well, they were just completely different. One, obviously as a photojournalist, I'm simply there to document. Of
course.
In those cases, particularly. But always, ethically.
Yeah.
But, you had before the allegations by Blasey Ford, Brett Kavanaugh had a normal start to the hearings. And it was a pretty relatively standard SCOTUS hearing where you'd have multiple days and you'd photograph him being questioned by the senators up on the dais. And so, but it's very intense. And you photograph, emotion and mood and perhaps, some fireworks and, you're in it. But then when the professor came, that definitely added, this other storytelling flavor that could be explosive and was, explosive. So to photograph her, she was very emotional. And so, to photograph her in that kind of, revealing, the situation, that happened to her was, you did the best you could to tell the most accurate story of her experience. And then when Brett Kavanaugh came up, he was also very emotional. And he also expressed his frustration, with the whole situation. And so then you also had his emotion. So everything shifted. So yes, it was, it was, you were so focused on their experience, and you didn't want to miss a thing.
What's your feeling now? You're feeling now that these certainly when they go into private sessions, you hear about them being very, very calm and very kind of serene, and but now that they're playing for cameras and they're being overly dramatic and you must go crazy with capturing these moments of expression. So even Kavanaugh when he came back and was that emotion, usually you'd be like, oh, I got that 1 second of emotion, but now you have all of these moments. Like, where do you pick and choose? And like, are you just shooting all of them, or like, what's your decision making process? Like something that's overly dramatic now.
Well, right. I mean, you do have to gauge, is somebody putting this on, but that's part of the story, perhaps. You know, I mean, that's part of the story. If somebody literally is doing that and they're putting on this kind of too much emotion act, well, then you're going to see it. You know, us photojournalists are, pretty good at being able to tell if something's real or fake. And then, of course, he was being questioned. So then there's, so let's say Kamala Harris is asking him, a really confrontational question, and then he reacts. So if the story is about them having, a real battle back and forth, then that's going to be what we're going to use. It's really where the news peg is. Right. It really is where is the news coming from? And so that's how we would decide. And also there were lots of protesters. At a certain point, they just didn't let them in anymore because it was getting very disruptive.
Yeah. How do you, when you send over photos in the instant, how do you decide? Because in a hearing like this, usually you don't have him. Kavanaugh was extremely expressive and continually. It's not like that one moment, they make a funny face and you got that image, or they make a face reacting to something. He was kind of consistently so. But how do you decide maybe not even in Kavanaugh, but like, how do you decide what you send over? Because I personally have a problem sending over. I mean, Trump is also a bad example because he's also very expressive, but sometimes he'll make that one of those Trump faces, and you're like, I know this is going to be the thing that people are going to want. This is what they're going to sell, but it doesn't necessarily, in the moments where it doesn't necessarily mean the moment, I mean, it doesn't express what the moment is, but it's the, at least, I mean, I shoot for a wire service, so it's a little bit different than daily newspaper, obviously. But it's interesting because I've been finding to try to have that kind of conversation in my head as a photojournalist more and more, because I'm seeing every once in a while, especially long term, I'm seeing my photos used to illustrate things that that image did not actually portray. And so I don't know. I mean, it's kind of an open question to, I guess, anybody. But it's something I've been thinking about a lot lately.
Mm-hmm. I've had issues with that personally. There's some protests in Berkeley that were mostly peaceful and had occasional skirmishes. Yeah. And I mean, I try to document the whole thing because I know that the pictures of peaceful crowds chanting or people in groups aren't going to get used. But if I file them, then I know that I've told that story accurately. Yeah. And pictures can be used with any story. And because it's a wire, people may not realize that picture wasn't from that exact story, but that's the nature of wires. Yeah. But I want to know that I've documented that accurately, that I haven't only sent in the 3 most tense pictures because it's not indicative of what I experienced. Yeah. I think that's kind of what you're saying, is like, you capture this one moment and it looks like something, but it's not the story of what. And there was a protest in Berkeley, some neo supremacists were trying to instigate this whole free speech Berkeley. We're going to go to the home of the free speech movement and try to see if anybody comes down on us for expressing ourselves. And there was a couple skirmishes. And I noticed that one photographer filed an entire take of just nothing but beautiful, violent skirmish pictures. Yeah. And I had these discussions with other people at the time going, I mean, these pictures are fantastic, but this is not what happened. I mean, it did happen, but it's not, this is not reflective of the story. Like, we shouldn't be taking just the best pictures, even though we're photographers. Yeah. We should be telling the story of the event as accurately as possible. Yeah. And that bothers me. I'm glad to hear you bring that up, because I'll see a picture I've taken used in a different context. Yeah. And it bothers me a little bit, but I also know that, well, I've shown other pictures from this. If someone goes to Reuters or Getty or whatever, they can see what else happened. They know that wasn't just... And
especially since more and more of us are shooting for wires or shooting as freelancers, the temptation is, if you only have, Like I like to, I used to like to upload, 15, 20 shots or something like that. And then I'd literally watch them like be removed from the wire site to cut down to like a tighter 10 photos, 8 photos or whatever. And I'm like, but so I've cut down, but then it becomes, I know what photos are going to sell. And this is how I'm paying my rent this month, And so it's this I'm watching, and it's something I talked to a lot of people at Northern Shore Course, and I'm happy that a lot of other photographers, because almost everybody that was there, even the students, are now shooting for some level of a wire service or something like that, that they're concerned about and they are thinking about. And so it's just it's interesting because, especially from the Kavanaugh hearing, I saw so many people responding. You're like, well, that photo is just being taken out of context. He wasn't really that angry. He wasn't this. He wasn't that. And, the fact that you can hear in a lot of the hearings, you can hear the brrr, brrr, anytime that, he made a face, or there's the, when he said the I like beer comment, there was a, you could hear the D5s, go.
The explosion of shutters.
And when Trump, Trump is, it's 100 times worse when it's in the Oval Office and you're like, I can't even hear what he's saying but anyway, that's a whole mirrorless discussion. But
I actually thought the same thing about Kavanaugh. I saw those pictures and I thought someone's just chosen the most aggressive looking picture. And then I saw clips of his hearing. I didn't want to watch it. I avoided it. And then I saw
it like that all the time. It's
all the time.
I saw was honest.
Well,
Zach,
you bring up a good question that I kind of want to pose to everyone. Is that you say you sometimes you submit a photos because you got to get paid of stuff that they're gonna carry. Have each of you shot a photo that you knew like they're definitely gonna want this, but I can't submit this for a personal reason or something like that? Has there been a photo that has kind of haunted you or made an impression in your mind, like I can't send this one in?
Tons.
I've not sent pictures in.
Over and over again. I go through this because visuals are so much more important than they've ever been. It's the tree doesn't fall in the forest unless we're there, particularly now.
Yeah.
And
what would be an example of like the one that kind of that just jumps your head? Like I love this photo's unbelievable and it would be fantastic, but I couldn't send it.
Give me something specific.
Yeah.
Something specific is actually a little bit difficult. Only in the sense that just know that I think all of us feel and have the responsibility of being photojournalists. Is that we always say, is this an accurate image I'm sending in?
Yeah.
And the money and I'm paid per image and all of that. But I hold back all the time because that's not an accurate portrayal of what happened. I was just down in Selma at the march going over the bridge. And, if people have kind of awkward ways about them or, I'm not going to be putting those images in. But if Jesse Jackson, gives a dirty look to Hillary Clinton, I'm going to put that in because that happened.
Yeah.
That happened. It didn't happen. But if it did.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
There was a picture I made on last Monday here down. I'm actually in the car driving back from Alabama again after the tornadoes, and there was a picture I made that I didn't file at all, and I texted it to a couple of people going like, "What's your impression of this picture?" And as soon as they saw what I was talking about, they immediately like, "Whoa!" Like that would change the entire narrative of this. Well, possibly change the narrative of these people who suffered from this tornado damage.
Yeah.
But it's an assumption that people who look at the picture would make about them based on the picture. And I have no idea whether that's accurate.
Yeah.
I have no idea who put this thing there, what it means, whether it means what I think it means. And it's not my job to put out something that's so inflammatory unless I know what that means.
Yeah.
If it's not going to be so inflammatory, if it's not going to make a big difference, then maybe. But there's a responsibility that we have to make sure that we're not going to make someone look really good or really bad based on inaccurate information.
Yeah.
And so that, I'm not going to describe the picture, but that's a pretty recent example. And then I texted it to my editor the next day, and he said, "Wait, you should file this." And I said, "Well, this is from yesterday, and I don't know exactly what happened here? And he's like, oh, actually, he thought about it for a couple of seconds. He's like, you're right. Yeah, we don't know what.
That's good.
Yeah.
He saw that. He saw what I saw, but at first he saw the newsworthiness of it, and then he came to my camp. So that worked out well. But
that's good.
Yeah, no, I have a whole catalog.
All the time.
Yeah. I have a whole catalog of in 2015 I was at the NRA convention, and there's only like five of us, and like 5 of us in the front row, especially when Trump spoke, and it was before he was president, and before he was even a serious, and he was before he even announced, so there was no security, there's nothing, and I'm with an 80-200, I'm like right up in his face. Access or 7200 right up in his face without the without being part of the pool or anything like that. It's access that I never get. And so I have, I literally just sat there and just, I think I have probably 1,000 images from his 10-minute talk of just, him going full on,
Sure.
His faces. All photojournalists at this point know his faces. And it's just like, I just like, I'm like, these photos would have sold, because it's a blurry background and it's timeless at that point, especially the wider ones with the NRA. And I've uploaded a couple of them, but not the ones that he's looking weird or anything. I mean, very expressive because he's an expressive person. But I've done the same thing. I have photos, you have photos of Bernie. Bernie's another very expressive person. Like, I'm just not going to upload those because they don't, the ones that make people look bad purposely. I mean, look at if they are making that face for more than like 5 seconds on purpose, then that photos might go in because they want that. They clearly want that look. They're all professional politicians, but yeah, no. I mean, it's kind of the same thing with like I Trump supporters. Sometimes they're very you get an overweight Trump supporter or overweight Bernie Sanders supporter as well, but or just like funny looking people and things like that. I may take the photo in the moment, but then like once I'm sitting down and editing and I go, no, there's no way I'm sending it in because it's just mocking a person.
So what's going to happen to all of these archived? What's going to happen to all these archived photos that you never ever shot that you love, but
they'll be published in a book called the Left Behind.
No. Will it always just stay hidden and then when you die it'll be released and everyone goes they were a genius?
Oh,
no, they'll be found 50 years later and then somebody make a documentary about Zach's life with it.
I'm kind of on the fence about that with the funny looking pictures though. Sometimes people look ridiculous for a brief second, and you don't file that.
Yeah.
But if they're looking down because they're reading their notes, and it kind of looks like they're thoughtful or sad, you file that because maybe there'll be a story where something negative happens, and they want a picture of them looking thoughtful or not quite chipper.
Oh yeah, I mean totally. Only the photos that are made to mock.
Yes.
I mean, because I see a lot of this, especially I work a lot in lefty media, and like I see a lot of that ridiculous like stuff of just like photos to make people look bad or stupid or whatever.
No, I mean it's like Hillary
that's
Clinton.
the line.
It's Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah.
It's like all those things. I mean, they take the extreme images because those two women, especially Hillary, have such extreme expression, so it's easy. It's easy. So as a photojournalist, it's like, what's her real expression? Woo!
I mean, the clapping, that is fantastic though. I mean that was it. Doug Mills got. I think a couple people got the photo. I think Doug Mills had probably the best one.
No, actually, because we have a rotation on the floor during the State of the Union, and it was the New York Times turn. And so it's great. So you're actually a photographer on the floor. Usually the only photographers on the floor during the State of the Union are House and Senate photographers. And so we have a journalist rotation.
It's video captures that I've seen then. Okay, yeah, from other angles. I remember seeing it from other angles.
No. Yeah. That was Doug because it was the New York Times turn. Yeah. So I just wanted to tell you that little bit of information. That
do you still sort of get chills when you're in like a State of the Union or walking into the Oval Office or like the first time must be unbelievable. Do you still feel it, or is there something still unbelievably special about it, or are you just like I've been doing this so long it's sort of secondhand?
It's so interesting when you go into the Oval Office. The 7 seconds of kind of like you're in, you're out. Of course, with President Trump. That has changed. Frequently, you can stay because he'll have his own little impromptu press conference, But it used to be you were just like, gone.
Okay. I actually, since you've been in this situation, I've always wondered this. There's the woman screaming, everybody out, everybody out. You hear her at every single time Trump keeps talking and talking and talking.
Yes.
Is she physically like...
It's like, thank you, please leave. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's like blankety blank, leave. Yes, exactly.
She actually has like the cow prods. Electric cow prods.
The cattle prod comes out.
Prods.
Probably has
exactly. But the answer to that question is that after all these years, I mean, there's always, I mean, even though there's still little butterflies because the State of the Union is a big night.
Yeah.
You know, it's definitely, I mean, it's big, and you know, and I mean, speaking about Doug, he had a great time on the floor. He had a great time. That was special, and sometimes we get to do some really special things in covering national government, which is, I mean, really unique. And so sometimes,
you know, we talked a little bit about, you know, what photos get published, what photos don't get published, and that brings up a good topic because that really kind of boils down to like ethics, right? That talks a lot about our ethics in our field. And, you know, I wanted to kind of touch on this topic. We talked about last week about the Afghan girl situation, National Geographic, and then there was that kind of weird mystery, like why did, you know, the video, and the video was done by Northrop, Tony Northrop, and, you know, he was talking about his, you know, the sort of story behind that, and then it went offline, and we were like, oh, it's probably has something to do with copyright, and there were conspiracy theories, and there were a bunch of people who were commenting on why the video went up and went down, and then finally, you know, Tony actually did another video, and he talked about, basically, he took it down because the estate or the wife of, you know, what's his name? You know, the wife of McCurry called him and said there was something wrong, so he took it down, and then he realized, nope, I was pretty much on the point except for one thing. So, what do you think about this whole, you know, situation? If you've been able to, you know, get yourself familiar with it, do you think that that McCurry took advantage of, you know, a girl to get a photograph, and he put, you know, that before, you know, her safety and security? Did he take advantage of this girl to get the photograph, or was the value of the photograph outweigh?
I'm sorry. Are we talking about the Steve McCurry image of the Afghan girl?
Yes.
What are we talking about? I'm sorry. We are. Okay.
Sure. So basically, he took the photograph of her, and, you know, National Geographic tried to portray it as, you know, hey, this is the horrors of war. Look at her eyes. She's so scared of war. And in reality, she was scared of this guy who she didn't know taking her photograph, and so National Geographic played it off like that. And then, you know, years later, it came out that no, I was just kind of uncomfortable around this dude who came in my classroom and ordered me to, you know, show my face and take some pictures and stuff like that, and I wasn't comfortable. And so that's what Tony was trying to express, is that, you know, McCurry...
That's what Tony was trying to express.
Yeah. So basically, you know, taking advantage of this situation of this girl to get this photograph, and then, of course, balancing that. Well, the photograph, you know, made a difference, and it raised awareness and probably brought funds to this, you know, village and these people. But it also, you know, was it at the expense of, you know, taking advantage of her? And then there was, you know, talks about, you know, ethics in photojournalism and stuff like that, and how we do our job and stuff like that. So
yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
I mean, that's always such a, I mean, difficult thing. It's also generational. You know, I would not ask somebody to stop and have them look into my camera and photograph, but I'm a newspaper photographer. We don't do that. Is not normally what we would do. You know, I mean, we would be there, and we would wait, for the moment. I mean, that was real. We would not influence, I mean, the reality, you know, to basically create a mood that I mean, the photographer wants to create, you know, unless it's going to be like a standard portrait or, I mean, something like that. But if you come into a documentary situation to interfere with that documentary situation, that's not something I would do. But Steve McCurry, and a National Geographic photographer, you know, at that time had that style of basically, you know, saying,
I mean, he's gonna call it a posed portrait.
Do this, do that. Look at me, and it definitely is a style of the time. It's a style of the time, and that style isn't used as much now.
Right.
Don't you agree with me?
Yes.
Yes. Good.
I mean,
Thank you so much.
Great. Next topic. No.
I never really.
Well, I mean, it's different
I'm gonna
categories.
call Tony right now, Northrop, and let him know what the definitive answer is.
Yeah, really. But should we say if it's wrong or right? Should we say that, I mean, was he masking the reality?
I think that's sort of what was brought into it.
It's definitely misleading.
Well, National Geographic was misleading the viewer in terms of how they interpreted and showcased the image and what was the story behind the image, and they didn't really.
Well, it's possible he misled them. Let's be honest. He's
Sure.
not.
Yeah,
He hasn't revealed himself to be the most ethical person as the years have gone on.
Right.
Exactly.
We don't know what he told them.
Yeah.
So, part of the interesting thing that Northrop goes into, and if you've read the original article from that magazine and kind of future ones, is the problem is that she is supposed to hereby represent the Afghan people of all of them, and they don't tell her story at all, and they don't tell her story all until I think it was 15, 17 years later, until they find her and make kind of another big thing out of it. And so obviously this is a problem all of us have when we're doing especially spot news stuff and we're traveling and moving on, that you don't know what photo is going to go viral, what photo is going to catch people's attention, and so you're like, I should have stopped and talked to that person and got their story or something, but there's no way often of knowing in the moment. But the problem is that he stopped, he took his time, took a portrait, but it was all about the photo, it was all about the image, and it was nothing at all about her. The story that was told about her later on was essentially kind of the mishmash of stories of people who were refugees at the time. And it's interesting because I literally just sat in on a panel where a Nat Geo photo editor was speaking, and she was joking about the fact that photographers getting captions and things like that and doing captions really well, and it was kind of part of the conversation. And she's like, yeah, unless you're getting photos from Steve McCurry and it's just Tibet. So I guess that he had based on that one anecdote, that he had a thing of where he would just send in a group of photos, and it was just the general area. And if you look at a lot of his work, it doesn't have, that I've at least published in Nat Geo, it doesn't usually have that kind of attached story the way that other photojournalists that work for, or photographers that work for Nat Geo have. And and a lot of some photographers are able to get away with that sort of stuff once their name is big enough that they can kind of not do that sort of thing. But to me, this is the biggest kind of problem with it, is the fact that there wasn't the follow-up, and some of that goes to McCurry, a lot of that goes to Nat Geo, especially since it's not like that photo took 15 years to kind of go viral. It's the fact that there wasn't a massive push to find this woman and kind of get her full story, which the viral photo I took from Charlottesville, I was lucky enough to actually get the interview with the man in the photo the next day. He hasn't done interviews since, even though many people have tried. So there was a moment where I could have had a photo just like that, where obviously I didn't set up a photo and everything like that for it to happen, but it is it's just, I don't know if there's an answer one way or the other with it, but you're obviously right that it's absolutely Nat Geo from the time, and also just kind of any Life magazine would have done the same thing, and there's there's very few stories from a lot of the larger one. Yep.
Maybe or maybe not. And this is not, I'm not speaking as a journalist, just speaking as a person. I get the feeling that Steve McCurry doesn't have the same level of empathy that I think a lot of other photojournalists have. He doesn't seem to particularly care about the subjects or their stories or ask questions. I'm making a broad assumption here.
He says he's not a photojournalist. He says he's an artist. Well, obviously, yeah.
Now that everyone knows his secrets, but he just doesn't strike me as someone who's an intellectually curious person who wants to know these stories and report on these stories for reasons that don't involve him and his ego. And I think that back then he probably just wanted to make pretty pictures that would get him attention, and he didn't particularly care. And there's probably other photographers and other images that have been in Life and Nat Geo that don't have stories behind them. But I think that a lot of journalists would have gotten that information even back then. Some didn't. But
I mean, the style now has definitely come to that you need more information. Yeah. That you do need to know the background. If this person is going to represent a group of people that you're doing a story on, you need to make sure that that's actually accurate. I think now that, just speaking about National Geographic, that they are definitely doing that, and they have strong ethics in finding the correct information and telling the correct story. That really was another time. And I think if Steve McCurry was here, I think he would disagree with you on his empathy level.
I make an assumption. I have no idea.
And his ability and how he tells a story. But he definitely is an artist. Yeah. And he's like a fine art photographer. He has a different style of interacting with the world with his camera, and then presenting it to the viewer. So maybe we shouldn't put the same standards on Steve McCurry than we would on, I don't know, a Melina Mera or something like that, who is
been presenting himself as an artist the whole time.
So
but
I mean,
that's his excuse now.
Here's the big question is that, I mean, my problem isn't even as far as as long as I've known about Steve McCurry, I've always thought that he was this type, not the bad things people would say, but like this type of photographer. Right. He was not a journalism first photojournalist like we are. He was a art first, and kind of, if it's for a journalist publication, then I guess it ends up being photojournalism, or it ends up being, that sort of editorial type of work. And so what I don't understand is how journalistic publications like Nat Geo keep hiring him, knowing it, without attaching a journalist along with him for the work that he does. I mean, there's one thing about, having an art photographer. Okay, cool. You want that look and you want that image. Then have somebody who's taking down the info, doing the journalism heavy lifting that he's clearly not going to do. And obviously, and it seems even back in 85 when this photo was taken, that's the sort of thing. They had journalists on this story. It was a written story. Mm-hmm. And it seems weird to me that you'd have it. And again, I know it was the style that you'd have this, you'd have these trekking photographers taking pretty photos, and then you'd attach them to a story. But it just seems like he is actually weirdly kind of honest about what he is. I mean, at least as long as I think looking at his work and knowing the fact that, like you can, if you've looked at his work enough times, you can see that he's done editing to his work, and changing, removing people and moving them around. Mm-hmm. And so like, I've never had this great, on a photojournalism end, at least, or a journalism or even editorial end, I've never had this great respect for him that a lot of other people have had, which is why these scandals that have come out aren't really that surprising to me. It's just been like, yeah, no, really? People didn't know that he edited his work? Okay. And so it's weird to me that he keeps, I mean, it's not weird in the way that he keeps getting hired because, well, he's a financially successful photographer, especially for Nat Geo and other publications. But it's weird to me that we kind of keep expecting, it to be a different story every time he gets a new publication or whatever. And the only thing that really bothers me about this, honestly, is Nat Geo kind of hasn't just been like, we messed up. Oh my God. Like, they've done a little bit of backtracking, but not like they're like, look at guys, we're a 200-year-old or whatever old publication, and you should look at, 50, 60 years ago what we were publishing. But they haven't done that. And it's they've done it very, very recently. They've started, but not with McCurry's work. They've defended that weirdly a lot, but they've started actually, hiring editors and hiring photographers who are a little bit, obviously, some lot more women and a lot, more people of color and, people that are local. not dropping in some, white dude from New York into Africa and being like, make a story.
It seems like they're very subtly trying to.
Yeah. No, yeah, they're just trying
make
to
up for their colonialist past.
Yeah, no, I mean, you have to remember that National Geographic, to add to your point, and that's, excellent, talk about, what's happening at, and Nat Geo. Nat Geo is a pretty traditional publication still. Yeah. They don't really do politics. Yeah. You don't see any political stories pretty much. You see environmental stories, you see things like that, but they don't really have an edge. And so still using, like they don't have Noctway. Yeah. I wonder if they would have more of a Noctway photographer who's more edgy and more political, that really isn't the style that they were going for. But a McCurry is softer and prettier. And that's still what National Geographic is in a lot of ways. Yeah. It's on your coffee table and it's pretty.
Yeah,
but they are definitely colonialized their look.
Definitely what part of National Geographic is. I mean, they were sort of known not for like breaking news. It was for traveling the world and capturing incredible images. And I think the first thing you think of National Geographic is these beautiful images. So to what extent do they have to say Steve McCurry is like, this picture was taken this way, or it's just representing an Afghan girl, which is pretty simple. That's what it is. It's an Afghan girl. They didn't say it's, this or that and the other. And, certainly, you look at McCurry, has he actually called himself a journalist? He never really has, right? It's sort of like, saying Bertinsky, that he's socially irresponsible for taking these beautiful pictures of these horrible. No, he's taking beautiful pictures, and he shouldn't be held responsible for that. And it's sort of what McCurry has done as well, is created incredible images, and there's a reason why they publish it, because he's that good. There's a reason he is who he is.
The assumption is that they're publishing an image that hasn't been modified, that they're photographing reality.
I think National Geographic takes up a little liberties because they're not breaking news. They're not this, and to a certain extent, they were that beautiful coffee table book, and people looked at it. It's like suddenly, this is the peek into the world that we never see.
Yeah.
But it is still journalism.
Yeah.
Still, and that's the line.
What's fascinating though is that, and this is off the McCurry thing. What's fascinating with Nat Geo is that they've gotten better since Rupert Murdoch bought them. Remember everyone losing their collective minds when Rupert Murdoch bought them? Like everyone's like, I'm canceling my prescription. I mean, I was out there, but then also I know that the Wall Street Journal, the news side of Wall Street Journal, has been solid and still is for the last, I may disagree with their business takes and things like that, but like they did some of the best economic and political reporting of the last decade. I think they've gotten better. I mean, their opinion section is complete and utter garbage. But
they have that wall between opinion and editorial, which most papers say they have and don't really have, and they do, and it's great.
Right. But it's been interesting that Nat Geo is actually evolving with a snail's pace. I mean, we would be honest here, but evolving. Unlike there's still a lot of publications there that haven't done that even that much that Nat Geo has, which got to give them respect on that. But to stand by the McCurry, I get that it's probably a financial powerhouse for them, that one single image, because dear God, it's on everything.
Let me pose this question because I want to know, Melina, have you been to any third world countries and photographed poverty or children in poverty?
Yes.
Okay.
I was just in the Congos, 2017. I was in the Congos. Yeah.
Okay. Travis, have you photographed any children?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I've shot. In
Cuba, right?
Children. Cuba and also Uganda. I went and photographed a whole place called Wells of Hope, where the children were there. Either their parents were on death row or had been executed and had no one to take care of them.
Jeez. Elijah, how about you? Any photographs in third world countries of children?
Madagascar.
What's that? Madagascar. Zach, how about you?
Developing world.
There's upstate New York. I'm sure you photographed
Syracuse. Yeah,
poverty and
children
in poverty.
is a developing.
It's third world country.
Very cold.
Yeah. But,
But
I mean, Ukraine during, other than Ukraine during thing, and like a very, very like 1 day in Mexico. I'm mostly a domestic political reporter as well, but yeah. So
yeah.
I mean,
so I asked these questions not to necessarily.
So where are you going with this?
So I'm not necessarily trying to defend McCurry, but I want to say, like, did you ever have any qualms about publishing those photographs that you shot of children who are poor, poverty, bad environments and stuff like that? Did you ever have any qualms photographing that? And do you think that
my situation with the Philippines is we work for a Philippine TV station anyway, so everything is local for us. So it's third world, but it's local, so it doesn't apply.
When I was in Madagascar, I was just
doing
for myself.
a story. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Melina. You first.
No, it's okay. No, I was doing a story about monkeypox in the Congo. So I was deep in the rainforest, and I was back in the Republic of Congo, and there was incredible amounts of poverty, and people, living a village life, subsistence life, and going up this river, for 10 hours, and there was just, people are living their lives as long as it's accurate to their lives, journalistically accurate, then of course I'm going to photograph it. I'm going to be working on a story about the Black Belt, which is the swath of land in the South. I think people know what the Black Belt is, and there is, and one of the reasons why I'm doing this story is because it's an area in America that's been left behind. There's going to be so much poverty down there. Yeah. There's going to be so much that I'm going to have to really say to myself, is me photographing this person living this way, am I taking advantage? Is this sensational? Or is this, the news that I'm going to be bringing back? For readers to see, is it accurate?
Are you planning on taking images of children and selling them on T-shirts and coffee table books?
Or to National Geographic.
But as long as it has that gold ring around it, it's okay.
I'll tell you, for me, when I went to Uganda, I was there working and shooting some documentary stuff and some video stuff for doctors and workers that work with trauma patients that were either through wartime or rape or incest and stuff like that. And I was supposed to go with several people to it was like a 4-hour trip into Uganda to meet these kids in this place that was taking care of them. And the other photographer got food poisoning the night before, so they didn't come. So I basically, it turned out I was going with just a band of workers straight up there, so one by myself. And once they kind of met me and joined me, the kids came out and sang, and it was one of the most emotional days I've ever had. I sat on the photos for probably a year before I did anything with them, because I wasn't sure how to represent it. Do I represent the poverty, where the living conditions? And basically what I did was I turned it into beautiful portraits of these kids and did it that way and approached it in a very different way. But I sat on them for ages because I didn't know what to do.
Yeah. No, I just was checking to see, again, some of the arguments made by Torny in his videos were, again, taking advantage of this poor, scared girl to, help profit and help, excel his career. And I think, if we think about it, we're all sort of guilty of going into these, impoverished, poor places. And, again, it's a you wrestle it with yourself. Are you profiting off of someone else's misery, right? So it's a topic we could probably go on for another couple hours on. It's probably a whole topic in itself. But I just wanted to touch on that briefly in sort of examining and looking at this whole thing.
Yeah, Elijah, you were about to say
I was going to add something to that. I think you guys have kind of covered most of what I feel, which is that I don't know what to do with some of those pictures. And like Melina says, if it's accurate, it's accurate. But at the same time, I don't know that if it's not part of a story, if it's not part of something that will be seen and may possibly make a difference and inform people, then I don't really know what to do with those pictures. However, I do have an interesting story where somebody did profit off of the picture that I took of her. And it's actually kind of a great story. So I flew to Madagascar because it was a story I wanted to do on remote fishermen who were fishing endangered species, because they could get so much money from these sharks and feed their family and live off this for months. And I thought that that'd be a side of the story you don't generally get to hear, because everyone's like, well, these people should know better. They're farming their own food supply. But when you're trying to feed your family, it's hard to see the big picture. And I thought it would be a sympathetic story to kind of see what's going on from their perspective. Flying to Madagascar, my laptop gets stolen the night I arrive. So I go, well, I guess I can't really shoot the story. What am I going to do? And I ended up just taking this tour with these Italian and German couple, and kind of went down the river on this canoe and went down the beach, and something I never do. I never take tours, but I didn't know what to do, and it sounded cool, and it would have been way more expensive for me to do by myself. So I do this tour, and I'm taking these pictures with my phone and posting them to Instagram. A lot of them are portraits because everybody wanted to have their photo taken, and it felt a lot more cooperative when someone is engaging with me for this picture.
Yeah.
And Apple ended up finding them on Instagram and ended up licensing 2 pictures for their Shot on iPhone campaign a couple years ago.
Wow.
And because anyone who's identifiable has to have a release, Apple requires it.
Yeah.
So I flew back there, took this trip down to this small Vezo village on the northwest side of Madagascar. Through it, I speak a little bit of French, so I was able to find a translator, explain what was going on. I said, I don't know that these will get used, but just in case, we need your permission. Got her consent for her and her baby, and then Apple paid me and said, okay, here's 10% that goes to, or 10 or 20%, it was years ago, that goes to her. And I'm like, okay, great. How do I get this money to her? She has no identification, no bank account, no birth certificate, no documentation of any kind.
Yeah.
And my plan was originally just to go there, withdraw the money from a bank account, and just bring her a suitcase of money, because the largest bill there is worth like $8. It literally would have been a suitcase. And I'm like, that can't possibly be the best plan. Like, and my picture random emails me out of the blue and goes, is this in Madagascar? Because my son is working there as a volunteer, and it looks like the people he works with.
Oh my God.
And he was volunteering with this marine nonprofit, this environmental nonprofit that was trying to educate people about marine life and marine ecology right up the coast from where she lived. So I get in touch with him on WhatsApp. He says, well, I can't talk to her because if I go and talk to her, everyone will know that her picture was used, and they'll know she has money coming to her. And in a small village, that would be actually a big problem for her.
Yeah.
So he got the driver for this nonprofit every time he passes through the village to look for her, try to get in touch with her. And then eventually, over a period of like 9 months, she went down to the next town over, which is like 4 hours away on this terrible road, got her birth certificate, opened a bank account, got a bank account routing number. And I, of course, was never sure whether this was just the driver kind of like telling me the wrong stuff. So I asked for photos of all of this. I have a photo of her holding this signed document with her bank account number on it and the bank account card. Yeah. Transfer the money. And it was like a year in the making. But sometimes people do make money off the pictures you take of them.
Yeah.
And
sure,
that's life-changing money for her. It broke down to like 4 years of full-time employment for an adult male in her village.
Wow.
And I think the driver was saying he was going to try to, or telling through this intermediary, he was going to try to advise her to open a little small business or to do something with it that it wouldn't just get used up.
She's now an Apple rep.
She opened an Apple store.
Yeah.
That's right.
Wow.
All right. Well, I want to make sure.
Story, but
no, that's a great story. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. I want to make sure we touch on this topic before we sign off tonight, because I think it's really important. We talk about diversity a lot, and it's rare that we have the diverse cast and crew that we have on tonight. I mean, how often do we have 4 male white men on a show talking about visual journalism? I don't know where Ron is, so...
but it's the rarest of all occurrences.
I don't know how it happens.
I've never seen this before.
I apologize.
We're probably the only 4 white men in all of visual journalism that I can think of. But anyways, we always talk.
Hard-pressed.
We have talked about diversity on this show, but usually we're talking about more of like from a minorities perspective or from a female perspective or something like that. And we've never actually talked about from the LGBTQ community. And we're happy to, or lucky to have 2 LGBTQ folks on today. So again, Melina and Elijah, you both are homosexual. So can you talk a little about what that's like, or bisexual, or however you want to, consider it?
Yes. No, it's fine. It's fine. No, really, it's you have to get comfortable with the language.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting in newsrooms. In newsrooms, you don't talk about your sexuality.
Right.
You do the job. I'm lucky enough to still be a staffer at a newspaper. I'm kind of like a dinosaur. Most people are freelance now, and most people are contract now. But in a newsroom, you definitely have, you have diversity. In photojournalism, and I actually mean diversity in black, brown, yellow, white, right. And, men and women. There are about half women in the newsroom to men, which is, which is really refreshing and a big change. I'm actually hearing myself. This is a little bit distracting. Sorry.
That's Elijah.
But yeah, it's Elijah.
It's not me. It's not me. I swear. I'm on the AirPods.
But the one thing about being a gay female in journalism is that it just makes me a better journalist. It just makes me come from a place that not many of my compadre, come from. And so I have another point of view and a bit of information that they don't have. So when I go into a story, I can be more empathetic. I can be empathetic as a woman. I can be empathetic as an Italian Czech American. I can be empathetic as a gay woman. I can be empathetic as a 50-year-old. I can bring all these things to a table that just makes me a better storyteller. Is there any kind of discrimination against me that I ever feel in the news business? I've actually have to say I've never felt it. But it's also really not talked about very much, and maybe it should be. Maybe it should be that. And actually, Elijah and I were talking about this, that editors maybe should know, because maybe there's a story that's really suited to you because you are gay. Mm-hmm. And then maybe that editor would like to put you on that. But they don't know because people don't talk about it. Because it's just like, oh, yeah, you're gay. It's fine. It's all good. It's like, oh, yeah, you're heterosexual. It's fine. It's all good. And that's wonderful that we do that. But all at the same time, then we're kind of avoiding the topic. But yeah, it's interesting. So Elijah, you and I talked about this yesterday a little bit. Elijah, you there?
He might be muted.
He might be, yeah.
Sorry, I muted myself to try to help you guys out.
There we go.
Right, and we had this conversation. I didn't want to bring this up unless Melina was on board with it. It wasn't, my place. Luckily, she was fine. And I think that Melina definitely benefits being in a newsroom where you don't have to bring it up. It doesn't have to be discussed, but the people in the newsroom enough. They know you. They know you're married, and they know you're married to a woman. And if there's a story that they might have a good fit for you, they know that they can put you on it. As a freelancer, that's a lot more difficult because it's awkward to bring that up with people when you just kind of shoehorn it into a conversation in the hopes that down the line, maybe there'll be a story that they'll think of you for because they know that you have that experience with the community, and that's something that maybe you can be a little more empathetic on. But I don't know how to bring that up with people. I don't want it to be a thing. I don't want it to be something that sets me apart, but I also want people to know, like Melina said, so there are stories that I could be more suited for. And as a freelancer, that's, I never know how to bring that up. And there's not enough of us to really have a conversation with or have groups with.
Do you think it sort of goes both ways in terms of like, you don't, if you brought it up, you would be suited for certain stories, but if you brought it up, they might think you're not suited for certain stories? Does that stop you, or is it?
No, not at all.
I would certainly think this industry is very welcoming, and opposed to certain other industries and play in an obvious locational. But I certainly entertainment field is wide open, and certainly I think the photojournalism is sort of progressive and leaning left in many ways. So I don't see it. But how has it affected you in any way? I mean, is it something?
It hasn't affected me in any way. It's just, I brought it up with Melina because I think it's interesting. There are so few of us that I like to make connections. I think that it's something that we can just kind of talk about and kind of bond over. I haven't experienced anything negative. It's just I'm always confused why there are so few gay and lesbian people in journalism. I mean, as a percentage of the population, there's got to be a percentage of the gay and lesbian population that are intellectually curious, that are creative, that have a passion for knowledge and being like, I love photography, to be put in these different situations for an hour, a day, a week. You get to be part of someone's life, and I can't imagine that there isn't a large percentage of gay and lesbian people who have that
it
same
certainly seems quite obvious.
curiosity.
I certainly shoot more, stylistically and not journalism than, and in certainly, shooting fashion and stuff like that. There's tons of, gay and lesbian photographers in every aspect. And to say that you guys being in this field and not being there is kind of odd. Like, what chooses them? I mean, obviously going to one, but not the other.
It's my curiosity that brings me to journalism. I just love learning about something new every day, or being able to be a part of someone's world for a period of time. And I just can't imagine that there aren't a statistically even number of people from the straight community to the gay community that have the same driving passions. And I'm a little bit confused that there are so few of us.
You just aren't branching out enough.
Well, that brings up an interesting point, and I think, Melina, you hit the nail on the head, right? Because in the workplace, it doesn't matter what your sexual orientation is, or it shouldn't. And it made me think like.
And really, in journalism, I think actually you said this, Zach, that in journalism and in photojournalism, we appreciate difference because we do stories on difference. We are, we are all inclusive. It's a very special place, photojournalism, and I think that's why. Sorry to interrupt you.
No.
That we are so open to it and very comfortable with it. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just want to say, like, again, how did you know? Elijah, Melina, how'd you know that each of you were, gay? Is that something that came up in conversation because you worked together? Did you, find out from hanging out after work? Are you part of a community? And how would someone who might be, gay in this career field connect with other gay, photojournalists?
Mm-hmm.
I've never met Melina. She seems wonderful. I'd like to meet you. But I was trying to the reason I asked to be on this show with Melina was because we were both on the same Washington Post list. And I thought, well, that'll make it easy instead of two different lists. And then I went to Facebook to look you up and saw you were married to a woman. I was like, well, great. Maybe she'll be willing to talk about this.
Right.
I don't want to thrust this on her, but maybe this seems like something we could talk about. And I talked to a couple journalists in DC, and they all said, oh, Melina's wonderful. I'm sure it won't be an issue. But I was like, well, I'm still gonna ask her first. But
okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
He did research on you.
Yeah, really, he did. Well, that's a good journalist. That's a good journalist.
And there's a gay and lesbian journalists association, and me and Melina actually talked about this yesterday. And I've thought about joining it, and this is for the sole purpose of being able to put it on my website as a group I'm associated with, so I won't have to tell people, because it's such an awkward thing to have to bring up. And not that I'm scared of it, it's just how do you shoehorn that into conversation when you're emailing an editor you've never met before, or
just open with
you don't personally know somebody.
Has it entered at all in being in photojournalism? Certainly with Trump saying enemy of the people and stuff like that, and now you're saying going to some of these places where gay and lesbian and press photographer. Do you find that at all, or is it no? Just normal every day. I'm going to shoot and it hasn't affected me. It must affect somehow.
Well, what goes on in my head and what I do
actually just
for
kind of
work
all
are different.
blends together. It actually. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Elijah.
I mean, I do my job. What I think about something is irrelevant as long as I cover it accurately and honestly. So, yeah, I mean, I'd be lying if I said it didn't affect me, but it doesn't affect my work. I don't go into a situation apprehensive or anxious or fearful in any way.
Not even unrelated to your orientation. Just have you felt it differently nowadays with the whole Trump enemy of the people and people treating press journalism? Are you sensing that difference?
I have. Well, yes and no. I mean, so I live in Atlanta now, but I just moved here a couple months ago from the Bay Area, and every time there's a protest in the Bay Area, it always follows the same pattern, which is there's anywhere from a couple hundred to a couple thousand people marching peacefully. Everything's fine. And then as the night progresses, these like Antifa or fake Antifa or, young college students who want to think they're anarchists come out and start smashing things. And this has happened long before Antifa became a thing when Trump got elected. And this has happened for years. And we're always enemies of those people. And it's always a kind of a fear-inducing thing. I'm a freelancer. I own my own gear. Newspaper's not going to replace anything that gets smashed. And we're going out there and people are shoving you and threatening you and saying, take this picture, we're going to smash your gear. It's very stifling. And it's, I know I've had a photographer friend who was taking pictures and got threatened at another protest by people who recognized him and said, we saw that picture you published. Don't do that again or we're going to fuck with you. And they're keeping tabs on us because we're not masked. We're public. Our bylines are under our pictures. They can look us up. It's scary. And the Trump enemy of the people thing is not made that better. But I haven't photographed enough rallies with him and his people to feel fear from that side of things. The rally in Berkeley, or a couple rallies in Berkeley, where there was some very far right and very far left people, the far right people never once intimidated me or threatened me in any way, but the far left people did, and they constantly do.
Yeah.
But that's very particular to the Bay Area. I'm not going to make generalizations for other protests, but that's a very Bay Area thing. Every journalist in the Bay Area who's ever covered a protest will say the exact same thing.
How about you? Have you felt it?
And also away from rallies, I work on stories in communities, and I work on stories talking about issues. And I think Elijah used the word stifling. That's an interesting word, but it is, when people learn who you are, who you work for, and you're trying to gain access to people that are basically, very, very key to you telling the story, and maybe they actually are at a point where they want to say yes, and then I can spend time with them and document their lives. But then they may have neighbors or friends that are saying, no, that's fake news. That's the Washington Post. You can't let them in. So I was recently in a situation where my subjects were completely intimidated, and then I got closed out because basically they said, my neighbors will not talk to me anymore. Melina, you have to leave. And it was an idyllic community, in America.
Yeah.
And it's happening everywhere. And I've had this happen to me multiple times, that basically people are being intimidated, who don't necessarily have those thoughts on their own, but they don't want to lose standing in their community.
Absolutely.
Those situations. So it's very powerful. It's and this is what's happening away from the rallies, which of course, we've all experienced. And that's one thing. And that's something very particular. But when you're out in America and it's just happening on Main Street, you're like, wow, okay, that's why you're not going to talk to me anymore?
Yeah. It's like when I was at
afraid.
I was at the rally that Zach and Marcus, I was with you guys, and then after the rally was over, I was just sitting in the press area, just kind of hanging out with Marcus and stuff like that, and we had, some people come up to us and they're like, where's the liberal media? Which one of you are the liberal media? Is that you? Point at me. I was like, hey, I'm just sitting here. I'm not associated with anything here. I'm just chilling out. But Marcus was very livid. He was like, we are not liberal. We are not conservative. We are media. We are journalists. We are doing our job. And you do not understand that. I will not talk to you.
I'm sure that doesn't go over well. At least you can pull the military card.
Yeah, I know, right?
My first, I get three. I don't think I've gotten asked if I was Washington Post yet, but I get asked, "Are you CNN?" Which always shows immediately because I'm holding two still cameras and I'm going, "Really? Really? You think CNN shooting mirrorless and Nikon 750? Yeah. But okay." But yeah, no, it's the first question. I mean, the fact that I'm a freelancer has actually started benefiting me in that way that I get, they don't know what Zuma Press is, the wire that I shoot for a lot. And so
they don't know if they should be mad at you or not. Zuma, is that? Idea. I don't know what to think. I don't know what to feel.
I mean, I'm a presenting straight white male, so I got
like you, but I'm not sure.
It's really tough for me out at the Trump rallies, trying to get people to talk to me. But no, it's so I mean, once you get past that, but it's like almost always the first question is, "Are you CNN?" They're like, no, and then they'll talk to me, and it's weird. And it's just like, the fact that I have, but yeah,
they're never like, are you Fox?
Yeah,
No.
No, I mean, I've had ads like, I mean, I do say, I mean, like, Daily Wire, like, more conservative news publications buy my photos all the time. So, I can always say that, but it is sad that, like, it's almost always the first question.
Yeah.
Not, what my name is, not what anything else is, to me is, are you CNN? Which is hilarious. I mean, Jim Acosta, if he's there, like, people take photos with him, afterwards. But it's, it's a lot of part of the show that goes on. But there is a lot of genuine hate and genuine anger that, when Trump says, those guys back there won't show how big the crowd is or whatever. I always make sure that I have my wide angle camera on, because I know at this point, wide angle lens on, and like doing an overhead shot whenever he's about to say that line, that they won't show the full crowd or whatever, just because then they look at me and I have a clear wide angle lens on, and they're just kind of like, they get angry and then they go, okay. But yeah,
you should one of these times you just say, yeah, I'm with CNN. What are you gonna do about it?
Yeah, that'll go.
Now what?
I'm good. I'm in a metal cage on the other. That's when I'm on the other side. So
swimming with sharks.
Indeed. All right. Well, we gotta end this show. It's been awesome talking to you all about awesome topics. I think we talked about some very good stuff, and I'd love to.
Great guest tonight.
Oh yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Thanks so much.
Before I let you guys go, we'll start with you, Melina. What is something you would like to direct people towards? Either your personal page or something else. Anything you'd like to plug?
Anything I'd like to plug? We have this wonderful photo blog at the Washington Post, which is really cool, and it's cool for people to see. It's called the Insight Blog, and any photojournalists from around the country or internationally can apply to have their work, their project on this blog, and the editors basically get the entries every week, and they go through them, and they and so there's some really, really great work on that photo blog. So it's called Insight Blog at the Washington Post. It's pretty cool.
Insideblog.uni.lu.
Give people a chance.
Insight.
Oh,
Images
Insight.
of our world. Yep. Just two separate words.
Okay. In the Insight blog.
Insight.
SIGHT.
I'll send you the link, Dave.
Yes.
I found it. I just want to make sure I put the link in the show notes.
Yes.
In the show notes.
Awesome. Elijah, what would you like to plug?
Unmute.
Yeah, you'd like to plug the unmute button. There we go.
Oh, sorry, I muted myself.
No worries.
Sorry, man.
Thank you for
website.
muting, but yes.
ElijahNouvelage.com. That's pretty much it. I put a lot of work on my Instagram that doesn't go on my website.
Oh, awesome.
So Wandering Home is my Instagram. I think that's more up to date on what I'm up to on a day-to-day basis. But thanks for having me on. I really have nothing else to plug. Not big on talking about myself, so.
No problem. Happy to have you on. I'll make sure we have links to both those pages on our show notes for tonight's show. Quickly before we cut out here, guys, Ron, is there anything you'd like to tell us about besides is that your daughter or your wife that was in the room?
That's my wife and my daughter just came home, guys. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, they're gonna. There's my daughter and there's my wife. There you go. All right.
Nice.
Plug in the family. Okay.
It's a family show.
Indeed. All right, Zach. Anything?
Actually, I'm gonna send people. I forget if I already did this last week or not, but send people over to the Washington Post's website. Search Ian Shapira. He has been covering Charlottesville and the kind of the year and the trials and things like that. And he wrote a whole story, really fantastic investigative piece using Daniel Schuler's photos and mine and some video. Discussing the two last people in my photo that I took at Charlottesville who haven't been found yet from the attack of DeAndre Harris. And so I'm very thankful that he has still one of the very few reporters that still gives a damn about what happened to Charlottesville, outside of, you know, talking about Trump said both sides, like actually caring about finding the people that, you know, committed some really terrible things there, and that the fact that this story isn't over. And the photo editor that, you know, got some photos from our colleague who's been an AtL Around the Lens guest before, Daniel Schuler. And can't recommend checking that one out enough, because it's rare that, you know, photo editors and journalists actually delve into like using more than just kind of the stock photos from random things, but actually like, and taking a very old story, you know, an old story at this point, a year and a half, you know, almost a year and a half, and, you know, filling out all the photos. And also Ian interviewed a photojournalist, which is very rare. If anyone, I think probably, I asked all my friends that were at Charlottesville, I'm like, has any of you actually been interviewed by a journalist about what you saw and what happened? And they're like, no, it hasn't. Ian talked to me, and we chatted, and he was great. He's an excellent reporter out there. And Melina, if you ever see him, or I don't know if he's out in Charlotte out there, or he's based in DC or not, but yeah. Give him a high five or something for me. And and the photo editor, whoever worked on the story, even though he didn't buy any photos for me, he just took the AP feed. But which is fine. But I'm super happy that he was able to use it. And actually, Daniel, because he went back through his archives, and this is something that I find very important. People, if you're covering these stories, keep very careful about your archives, because Daniel went back through his archives and found a photo that he had to pull up the lighting on a lot, but found a photo that he didn't know he had of DeAndre Harris being attacked.
Wow.
And so only a year and a half later, because of a full thing, and so he was able to find this. And so, you know, I talked to a lot of photographers who are like, I don't keep anything that's not used. And I just throw it away or delete it. And I'm like, history is important if you're a photojournalist.
Yeah. Don't delete anything.
Yes. Just terabytes of hard drives are cheap these days.
Yeah, I think I still have every single photograph I've ever taken. I think.
Yeah.
I wish I did. Anyway.
I have most of my film. I did discard a lot of film when I was leaving photography school. Just because they were like, you know, I was recycling it. Essentially, recycling, you could, you know, they could get the silver or whatever, you know, out of it. So I recycled it. But Travis?
Yeah.
Anything from you, buddy?
As always, if there's anything in this episode that you want to follow up with, or if there's ideas for future episodes that you have topics that you think we should know, contact us at Around the Lens. If you want to follow up on any of the pictures I talked about the City of Lost Children, the Uganda photos that I took of the children there, you can find that on my website at TravisWKeys, KEYES.com. And always, I can be found on my social media at Instagram at TWKEYES. And we look forward to seeing you next time on Around the Lens.
Absolutely. And next week we will have on the show talking about his CNN Top 100 photo, Mr. Noah Berger. So that should be an interesting show. And then completely off topic, for anyone who's interested in video games, I run a YouTube channel called Unlimited Draw Distance. I recently posted some videos I shot when I went to E3 last year. Nice. So it only took 9 months, but I finally got the videos edited and online.
Just in time for the next E3.
Indeed, Breaking news. So if you're going to E3 this year, then you can watch my videos and help get yourself prepped. So think of it like that.
Very
But anyways, I do want to thank our guests and our hosts for tonight's show. Thank you so much, Elijah.
Thank you again for having me.
Thank you, Melina.
Thanks so much, guys. What an experience.
Indeed.
So nice having you.
Thank you so much.
All right. For Zach, Ron, and Travis, I am David J. Murphy. This has been Around the Lens, episode 165, and we are out.